What if the moment you stopped chasing wasn't the end of the story, but the moment the dynamic quietly flipped? You didn't pull away to hurt her. You didn't go silent to prove a point. You stepped back because your peace finally mattered more than the outcome, and that's when something subtle started to change. In this video, we're breaking down 11 quiet signs she's thinking about coming back, and how your calm, disciplined silence is what created the shift in the first place. This is what happens when a man stops reacting and starts mastering himself. If you believe protecting your peace is power, hit like, subscribe, and stay with me, because these signs are easy to miss if you don't know what to look for. Let's get into it. Number 1. A pause before she replies. She used to reply instantly, or not at all. But now, there's a delay, one that feels intentional. She types, deletes, rewrites. That pause is thought. That silence is a sign. You have to understand what's really happening in that space between her seeing your message and her finally responding, because that gap is no longer emotional indifference, it's emotional awareness. And awareness only shows up when someone cares about how they are perceived. Before, her communication came from impulse. If she felt like talking, she did, and if she didn't, she disappeared without reflection. Now there's friction between feeling and action, and that friction means she's thinking about you, about her words, about her tone, about how she shows up in your life. People don't edit themselves for someone they're emotionally finished with. Editing means investment. It means the connection still carries weight in her mind. You can feel the difference in the energy of her messages. They're more measured, less careless, almost like she's trying not to say the wrong thing or trigger distance again. That's not emotional withdrawal, that's emotional caution. And caution appears when something matters. A woman who has truly closed the chapter doesn't rehearse sentences in her head. She responds flatly, briefly, or not at all. But when she pauses, she's managing emotion internally. She's considering impact. She's aware that how she communicates now could shape what happens next. That's a quiet sign her internal world is moving again in your direction, even if she hasn't said it out loud. And here's the part most men miss. This shift didn't come from pressure. It came from your change. You stopped jumping to reply. You stopped filling every silence with reassurance, jokes, or emotional explanations. Instead of reacting from anxiety, you responded from steadiness. Without announcing it, you modeled restraint. Like Epictetus taught, speak with intention, not impulse. When you slowed down, you showed that not every feeling needs immediate expression, and now she's unconsciously mirroring that discipline. That's Stoicism in real life, not quotes, not theory, but behavior that quietly reshapes emotional dynamics. So when you notice that pause, don't rush to break it just to ease your own curiosity. Let her think. Let her choose her words. Let the silence breathe. That space is where respect grows, where emotions organize themselves, and where she starts showing up with more care than before. Sometimes that thoughtful pause is the first real step back toward you. Number 2. The subtle story reaction. A heart on your story. A laugh at your joke. She doesn't message, but she's present. She used to ignore the details. Now she reacts to them, softly, testing the waters. This is the kind of sign that looks small on the surface, but carries emotional weight underneath. Because attention is energy, and people do not invest energy where they feel nothing. Before, you could share something meaningful, funny, or personal, and it would pass by her like background noise, something she barely registered because emotionally she had already pulled back, already convinced herself you were part of the past. But now she slows down just enough to acknowledge what you post, and that shift from indifference to quiet engagement tells you her awareness has turned back in your direction. She may not be ready to open a conversation, may not even be ready to admit to herself that she's curious again, but she is no longer comfortable pretending you're irrelevant. A reaction is emotionally safer than a message. It lets her show presence without risking rejection or exposing how much she's actually thinking about you. It's a low-commitment signal, but it's still a signal, and signals matter because they show where attention is flowing. She's watching how you move, how you carry yourself, how your life looks without her constant involvement. She's noticing the tone of your posts, the energy behind your words, the steadiness in your routine. And what she's responding to isn't just your story, it's the version of you she sees now. Your calm, your structure, your growth, your life, no longer orbiting her moods. That contrast between who you were when you chased and who you are now when you're centered creates a quiet tension in her mind, a curiosity she can't fully push away. Notice something important here. You're not performing for her anymore. You're not crafting posts to get a reaction. You're not checking who viewed what or reading meaning into every notification. You're simply living, and that's the shift. Your focus has returned to what you can control: your habits, your direction, your peace. That grounded energy changes how you're perceived because it removes neediness from the equation. You're no longer trying to be seen, you just are. And paradoxically, that's what makes you more visible. So when she reacts, stay grounded. Don't suddenly increase your effort. Don't turn a small signal into a big emotional move. Let the interaction stay light, natural, unforced. Because when she feels that you're not leaning in to pull something from her, she feels safer stepping forward on her own. And that's how a return begins, not through pressure, not through persuasion, but through the space your growth created and your steadiness maintained. Number 3, she brings up your wisdom indirectly. She posts quotes you once shared, mentions topics you introduced. She's not talking to you, but she's talking about you in her own way. This is one of the most subtle yet meaningful shifts you'll notice, because it doesn't come through direct communication, but through reflection. And reflection only happens when something left a real impression. When she starts sharing ideas that mirror conversations you once had, when she uses language that sounds like the perspective you carried, or suddenly values concepts she once brushed aside, it means your influence didn't disappear when you did. It went inward, and what goes inward tends to last longer than what stays on the surface. Think back to how your connection used to be. Maybe you were the one encouraging patience instead of impulsive reactions, the one who chose calm during tension, the one who spoke about self-respect, growth, or emotional control. At the time, she might not have fully met you there. She may have listened without integrating it, or even resisted it because it felt unfamiliar. But now, those same ideas return through her own voice. That's not coincidence. That's emotional processing happening after the fact. There's something powerful about delayed understanding. Sometimes a person only recognizes the value of someone's mindset once that steady presence is no longer right in front of them. Your absence created space, and in that space, your words and actions gained clarity. Like Musonius Rufus said, "Practice what you preach, and then some." You didn't try to win arguments with philosophy. You demonstrated it. When emotions ran high, you grounded yourself. When things felt uncertain, you didn't spiral. When the connection changed, you carried yourself with dignity instead of drama. That lived example becomes a reference point in her mind, especially when she faces emotional situations that feel unstable. So when you notice her echoing those perspectives, resist the urge to interpret it as a cue to chase or reinsert yourself. Let the influence speak for itself. Because when your way of seeing the world quietly shapes how she thinks, you've moved from being a temporary figure in her life to being part of her internal compass. And that kind of impact doesn't fade easily. It often becomes the reason she starts looking back, not just with emotion, but with new understanding. Before we move on, take a second to reflect on this in your own life. Have you ever seen someone understand your value only after you stepped back? That's not ego, that's impact. It shows that the way you carried yourself mattered more than you thought. So before we move on, take a moment to reflect on your own experience. If this resonates with you, show some love by liking the video and drop a comment sharing your thoughts, or simply type, "Real influence doesn't chase." Let's see who truly understands this shift. Number 4. Her friends check in. Suddenly, her friends view your story, like your post, or casually mention her. That's not random, it's reflective energy. She's curious, but too proud to show it directly. A lot of men brush this off as coincidence, but social circles don't shift their attention without a source, and most of the time, that source is conversation happening somewhere you can't see. When someone still has emotional threads tied to you, those threads rarely stay contained. They move through the people she trusts, because that's where she processes thoughts she's not ready to face alone. So when her friends suddenly become aware of your presence again, it's often because your name has re-entered the room in conversations you weren't part of. Maybe she asked what you've been up to. Maybe she showed them something you posted. Maybe she brought up an old memory in a casual tone that didn't sound as casual as she intended. Curiosity has a way of traveling sideways when pride blocks the direct route. Reaching out herself might feel too vulnerable, too exposing, especially if she's unsure where you stand now. But the need to know doesn't disappear just because she stays silent. It simply looks for another path. You have to understand, this isn't about drama or games, it's about emotional gravity. When someone once held importance in her life, that doesn't just switch off. If she feels a shift in you, a change in your energy, a sense that you're no longer waiting or emotionally orbiting her, it unsettles the old dynamic. Her friends become a safe bridge between her curiosity and her caution. They observe. They gather small impressions, and sometimes they subtly report back without even realizing that's what they're doing. What makes this different now is your posture. You're not posting for reactions. You're not signaling anything. You're simply living in alignment with yourself. Like Seneca advised, he who seeks wisdom should not crave to be known. You're not trying to be seen, you're just being. That groundedness carries weight, and people feel it, even if they can't explain why. So, when you notice her circle quietly tuning in, don't overanalyze or change your behavior. Stay steady. Because when curiosity reaches beyond her and into her environment, it often means something inside her hasn't settled yet. And unsettled feelings are usually the beginning of reflection, not the end of the story. Number 5. She brings up old memories. A shared joke, a location, a photo. She gently revisits the past not to reopen it, but to see if it still matters to you. When someone starts circling back to moments you once shared, it's rarely random nostalgia, because memory is emotional. And we don't revisit emotional memories unless something inside us is still unresolved or quietly meaningful. She might send a picture of a place you both went, reference an inside joke that only the two of you would understand, or mention a small moment that seemed insignificant at the time but suddenly feels highlighted now. On the surface, it looks light, casual, but underneath, it's a form of emotional checking. She's not asking directly, "Do I still matter?" She's asking it through memory. Think about what memories represent. They are emotional bookmarks. When she brings one up, she's not just recalling the past, she's testing the emotional temperature of the present. She wants to see how you respond now compared to before. Are you still overly sentimental? Do you lean in eagerly? Or do you acknowledge the memory calmly without getting pulled back into old patterns? That response tells her more than any conversation about feelings ever could. What's interesting is that while she's revisiting the past, you're not living there anymore. You've moved your focus to who you are becoming, not who you were together. Like Marcus Aurelius reminded himself, the past is a memory. The future is imagination. Only the present is real. You're grounded in your current path, your growth, your routines, your purpose. You can appreciate a memory without needing to relive it. That emotional stability changes the dynamic. And here's the deeper layer. When she senses you're not clinging to what was, the memory feels different to her too. It becomes less about comfort and more about contrast. She starts seeing the past, not as something she controlled, but as something she may have underestimated. Your calm response shows that you valued the experience but don't depend on it. That balance creates respect. So when she brings up old moments, don't shut them down, but don't sink into them either. Let the memory exist, acknowledge it with warmth and composure, and return to the present. Because when she's the one revisiting what you both had, it often means she's beginning to measure it against what she has now, and that's where reflection deepens. Number 6. Her life looks curated now. Better outfits, thoughtful captions, cleaner posts. She's trying to appear fine, but carefully so. Not for everyone, just in case you notice. You can feel when someone's online presence shifts from spontaneous to intentional, because the energy behind it changes. The photos look more composed, the angles more deliberate, the colors more balanced. The captions sound reflective, measured, sometimes even subtly philosophical. It's not loud, it's controlled, and that control tells you something emotional is being managed behind the scenes. When people are fully at ease, they don't usually edit their image this carefully. But when someone specific might be watching, presentation becomes strategy, even if it's unconscious. Notice the difference from before. Her posts may have once been random, emotionally driven, or simply expressive without much thought. Now there's polish, restraint, and a quiet narrative being built. I'm good, I'm growing, I'm stable. But that message isn't meant for everyone equally. Social media is public, but emotional signals are targeted. Often, the real audience is just one person she wonders about, one presence she no longer has direct access to. Your role in this shift is bigger than you think. You didn't respond with drama. You didn't try to prove your worth after the distance. You didn't post to provoke or send hidden messages. You just continued evolving quietly, your routine, your focus, your self-respect. That steady, grounded energy creates contrast. Like Cleanthes, known for silent endurance and quiet discipline, you didn't compete for attention. You embodied stability. And presence like that is felt, even from afar. When someone senses they've lost easy emotional access to a person who once gave warmth freely, a natural reaction is to raise perceived value. Not through confrontation, but through image, through subtle signals of growth, through showing they are still someone worth noticing. It's not manipulation, it's human psychology, responding to emotional distance. The key for you is not to get pulled into reacting to the surface. Stay calm, stay centered, appreciate the effort without chasing it. Because when your attention is no longer automatic, it changes the emotional equation. She starts to realize that appearance alone isn't enough. Alignment matters. And that realization often becomes part of the quiet path that leads her back toward reflection about you. And this is where you pause for a second and turn the focus inward, because her presentation isn't the real story, your response is. Notice how small shifts like intention, restraint, and quiet effort often reveal more than loud actions ever could. Ask yourself where you've seen this kind of subtle signaling in your own life, and how your calm, grounded presence may have influenced it. If this resonates, leave a comment sharing your thoughts, or simply type, "I stay centered," and let clarity speak. Sometimes the biggest sign of growth isn't what you understand about someone else, but how little you need to react to prove anything at all. Number 7. She stops arguing with herself. No more erratic blocks, no sarcastic quotes, no online turbulence. Her chaos softens, and still, you remain unmoved. One of the clearest quiet shifts happens not when she does more, but when she does less. Because emotional turbulence often shows up as noise, and when that noise fades, It usually means the internal storm is settling. Before, you might have seen indirect posts, sharp captions, emotional swings, moments where her online presence felt like a reaction to something unspoken. That kind of energy usually comes from inner conflict, from trying to convince herself she's over it, while still feeling pulled by unresolved emotion. But now, the sharp edges smooth out. The public emotion cools. The performance of indifference disappears. This isn't emotional absence, it's emotional processing. When someone stops broadcasting frustration or confusion, it often means they've turned inward instead of outward. She's no longer trying to prove she doesn't care. She's sitting with what she actually feels. And that shift often happens when the other person doesn't give resistance to push against. You didn't argue. You didn't defend. You didn't react to indirect signals. Your steadiness removed the emotional friction that used to keep the cycle alive. Like Zeno of Citium taught in his quiet, paradoxical way, silence can be a form of clarity. When there's no external drama to focus on, a person is left with their own thoughts. Your lack of reaction wasn't coldness, it was control. And control creates space. In that space, emotional exaggeration loses momentum, and honesty slowly replaces noise. You staying unmoved doesn't mean you're indifferent. It means you're grounded. You're not riding emotional waves anymore. You're standing on solid ground. And when she sees that nothing she does online shifts your posture, it changes her approach. The energy that once went into emotional display now turns into reflection. So if you notice the chaos settling, don't assume the connection has vanished. Often, it means the opposite. It means the emotional conversation moved off the screen and into the mind. And when someone stops fighting the feeling outwardly, it's usually because they've started facing it inwardly, and that's where real reconsideration begins. Number 8. She mirrors your growth. You focused on yourself. Suddenly, she's journaling, training, or sharing self-love posts. This isn't coincidence, it's energetic reflection. One of the most powerful signs that someone is still emotionally tuned to you is when their behavior begins to shift in the same direction yours did, because growth patterns don't usually synchronize without influence. You turned your attention inward. You built routine. You worked on your body, your mindset, your stability, and not through speeches or announcements, but through quiet consistency. Then, almost subtly, you start noticing similar themes appearing in her world. She talks about healing. She posts about boundaries. She shares things about discipline, clarity, or becoming better. That's not random timing, it's psychological mirroring. When a person once shared emotional space with you, your direction becomes a reference point, especially after distance creates reflection. She may not consciously say, "I'm doing this because of him," but internally, she feels the contrast between who she was during the connection and who she senses you're becoming now. That contrast can awaken a desire to rise, to not be left behind emotionally or personally. So she moves, she adjusts, she evolves, but along a path that looks familiar. This is why embodiment matters more than explanation. Like Epictetus taught, you don't need to lecture your philosophy, you live it. You didn't tell her to grow. You didn't try to fix her. You simply aligned yourself with your own progress. That silent self-respect carries influence without force. And influence without force is the most lasting kind. The key is not to interpret this as a signal to rush back in or reclaim a role in her life. Stay on your path. Because when she mirrors your growth, what she's really responding to is the stability you now represent. You became an example, not through control, but through consistency. And here's the deeper layer. When someone begins changing in the direction you once embodied, it means your impact didn't fade. It integrated. She's not following your words. She's following the direction your life took, and that often becomes the quiet bridge that brings emotional distance back toward connection. one step of reflection at a time. Number 9. She doesn't fill the void with someone else. No rebound, no public distraction, or if there was, it didn't last. Now, the silence is real. One of the clearest emotional signals is not what she does, but what she doesn't do, because people often rush to fill emotional gaps when they are trying to escape feeling them. A rebound, constant social noise, or sudden visible connections usually act as emotional anesthesia, a way to avoid sitting with loss, uncertainty, or reflection. But when that doesn't happen, or when it happens briefly and fades, it suggests something deeper is going on. She's not running from the void, she's facing it. Sitting with emotional space is uncomfortable. It brings memories back, highlights what's missing, and removes distractions that once kept feelings blurred. When she doesn't replace you quickly, it often means the connection carried weight that can't be swapped out easily. Surface attraction can be replaced. Emotional impact cannot. Silence becomes louder when there's nothing covering it. You understand this because you chose not to numb yourself either. Instead of drowning the emptiness in attention, validation, or quick substitutes, you stayed present with it. That's a very Stoic kind of strength. The Stoics practiced voluntary discomfort, choosing moments of challenge, solitude, or restraint to build resilience and clarity. You did something similar emotionally. You let the space exist. You didn't rush to escape it. That decision changes the energy of the situation. When both people stop distracting themselves, reflection deepens. She begins to feel the absence more clearly, not as panic, but as awareness. She can't blur the memory of what you brought into her life with someone new, because nothing superficial fully covers something meaningful. The important part for you is not to interpret her silence as indifference. Sometimes, silence without distraction is the loudest form of processing. It means she's not replacing the connection, she's understanding it. And understanding often comes before reconsideration. So, stay grounded in your own path. Because when someone sits with the emotional space instead of escaping it, they're not moving away from the experience, they're moving closer to seeing it for what it truly was. And that's often when the thought of returning quietly begins to grow. Take a moment to sit with this. Silence doesn't always mean absence of feeling. It often means something is being processed at a deeper level. When neither of you rushes to fill the space, clarity has room to form. Ask yourself, did you try to escape the discomfort, or did you stay grounded in it? That choice matters, because when space is met with steadiness instead of distraction, it turns into understanding. And understanding is often the quiet beginning of everything that follows. Number 10. She checks your peace. Hope you're doing well. You seem focused. It's not just kindness, it's curiosity. Is he really okay without me? When someone reaches out with neutral, surface-level concern after a period of distance, it often carries more emotional weight than it appears to. These aren't deep conversations. They're temperature checks. She's not asking about feelings. She's observing your state. The tone is calm, almost casual, but underneath it is a quiet question. Did losing me shake him, or did he actually grow? People expect emotional aftermath. They expect signs of struggle, hints of longing, proof that their absence created visible impact. So when she approaches you and finds steadiness instead of emotional turbulence, it unsettles the narrative she may have been telling herself. Your composure creates cognitive dissonance. If you're truly okay, then the story that you needed her more than she needed you begins to fall apart. That's why the curiosity shows up as politeness. It feels safe. Just checking in sounds harmless, but emotionally, she's studying your energy. Is your focus real? Is your calm genuine? Or are you pretending? And the more consistent you are over time, the clearer the answer becomes. What makes this powerful is that you didn't perform your healing. You didn't broadcast your transformation. Like the Stoic practice of journaling for self-understanding rather than public display, Your progress happened internally before it ever became visible externally. You built discipline quietly. You structured your days. You redirected your emotional energy into purpose instead of performance. So when she looks at you now, she doesn't see someone trying to prove something. She sees someone settled. And peace is magnetic precisely because it can't be faked for long. When your stability isn't a reaction, but a foundation, people feel it. Her message, simple as it sounds, often means she's trying to understand where she stands in your new world. Not to claim space immediately, but to see if space still exists. So, respond with the same grounded tone you've built. Warm, but not leaning. Present, but not reaching. Because when your peace becomes the question she can't answer on her own, reflection deepens, and that's where the thought of returning begins to feel less like impulse and more like consideration. Number 11. Her ego softens, but she won't admit it yet. She won't say, "I miss you," but her tone changes. Her replies get longer. Her eyes linger. She's no longer defensive, just uncertain. This stage is quiet, almost fragile, because pride rarely disappears overnight. But it does loosen when resistance no longer feels necessary. Before, conversations may have felt guarded, sharp at the edges, or emotionally distant in a way that suggested she was protecting herself from feeling too much. Now the posture shifts. Her words stretch a little further. Her energy feels less reactive. The walls aren't gone, but they're no longer reinforced. And that uncertainty you sense is important. It means she's no longer fighting the feeling. She's trying to understand it. When ego is strong, a person defends their decision more than they reflect on it. But when ego softens, reflection begins. She's not ready to admit longing because saying it out loud would mean acknowledging vulnerability, and vulnerability takes time. So instead, it shows up in subtler ways: lingering attention, softer tone, more openness in conversation. The emotional armor becomes heavier to carry than the honesty she's slowly moving toward. What makes this moment powerful is your position in it. You didn't stay steady to prove her wrong. You didn't grow in hopes she would regret leaving. Your progress was not a performance aimed at her. Like Seneca wrote, "To win without pride is nobler than to yield without shame." You didn't need her to lose the situation for you to feel strong. You didn't need an apology to validate your worth. You chose self-respect regardless of outcome. That quiet independence is what lingers in her mind now. When someone realizes the other person didn't crumble, didn't chase, didn't harden into bitterness, it challenges their assumptions. It creates a space where admiration can grow alongside uncertainty, and admiration is often the first emotion that reopens the door. So when you sense her tone softening, don't rush to label it or force clarity, let it unfold. Because when ego steps back, even slightly, the emotional truth gets closer to the surface. And sometimes, that quiet internal shift is the real beginning of a return, long before the words ever arrive. And this is where the story quietly closes for now. Not with a dramatic reunion, not with promises or confessions, but with awareness. You didn't step back to create distance, you stepped back to protect your peace. And in doing so, you shifted the entire dynamic. Her attention didn't disappear, it changed form. It softened, slowed, and turned inward. These signs aren't guarantees or signals to act. They're reminders of what happens when you stop chasing and start standing firmly in yourself. If this resonated with you, take a moment to pause and reflect on where your energy is going now. If you value calm over reaction and self-respect over control, hit like, leave a comment sharing which sign stood out to you most, and watch the recommended videos on screen to continue this journey of quiet strength and self-mastery.